And at first I was very nervous because you're right. Here's the superintendent of a large urban district. It's a public platform. And what are people going to think if I say the wrong thing or if I make the wrong comments? Over time, you just have to trust yourself. You have to take that first leap of faith, get into that space and realize it's a vulnerable space to be. As educational leaders, we need to model that vulnerability if we're going to move forward.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Saba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week as we explore design thinking and take a look at stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools. There's a question that people often ask Jerry Almendarez, the superintendent of Santa Ana Unified School District in Orange County, California. They say, we've been watching the work you're doing at Santa Ana, and we're really interested in learning more about how you're creating a culture and a mindset toward innovation and change within your district. One day while Jerry was sharing that this is a question that he's often asked, I said, let's record your answer and share it with the world. I am delighted to have Jerry here on the podcast today. Ever since I started the podcast, very much around the same time that I began to follow Jerry online, I knew this is somebody that I wanted to interview, and I am thrilled that this is my first interview of the year. Jerry leads the urban school district of Santa Ana Unified. It's the 10th largest district in the state with over 55,000 students. It's the second largest employer in the city with over 5,000 employees. Jerry joined the district just a few short months before the pandemic began. He came to Santa Ana from the Colton Joint Unified School District, where he served as superintendent since 2010. His career in education spans 27 years and includes experience at all levels, from classroom teacher to superintendent. His TED Talk, My Superintendent Story, is a testament to his promise to inspire and motivate those who at one point may have lost their way. He tells the story of a young man named Michael, whose story of redemption and relentless determination is an example for all that no matter how many times we fail, there is always a chance for success. It's a message that serves as the foundation for how he leads. Like I mentioned before, I only recently met Jerry. However, through his intentional use of social media, I've had a front view seat and the privilege of watching him lead through the pandemic as he embodies the very definition of what it means to be a transformational leader. Jerry encourages creativity, he recognizes accomplishments, he builds trust, and he inspires a collective vision within his district and beyond. He acts as a role model for the beliefs and values he wants to see in his district that others adopt, and he believes that we, like Michael, are all able to rise to the occasion. That's the very type of innovation that people turn to Jerry for. So how does he do it? In this episode, part 1 of a 3-part series, Jerry takes us on a journey as to how his personal and professional experiences intertwined to shape him into the leader he is today. So I begin by asking Jerry, what does innovation mean to you?
Well, one of my mentors reminds me all the time, it says innovation is the ability to create a culture of empathy. But it's also the ability, in my mind, to develop that strategic foresight. So what does that look like? It looks like a person who has the ability to reflect, to recognize, to predict, and to grow personally and professionally, and maintain that mindset that allows them to thrive in this rapidly changing society and to continue the work that we're doing. In essence, creating a culture of empathy to allow individuals to take those risks. So it is a mindset. I think it's important that school leaders reflect on that on a daily basis and really take the opportunity to really change the way they operate and the way they lead.
Innovation is a mindset, Jerry shares. And that mindset, he says, comes from being able to reflect, recognize, and predict. It's these stages, Jerry shares, through which he develops the strategic foresight to ask bold and ambitious questions and gives others the permission to do so as well. Here's one of my favorite examples. In a recent article, Jerry, along with other superintendents of urban school districts, posed a new vision for schools. They said, what if we flipped the current model of public education on its head and made the standard of learning the constant and time the variable? What if the goal of education was to get all children truly life-ready, no matter the obstacle? In a world where guidelines are changing from one day to the next, coupled with the increasing demands placed upon schools, we often hear that there is no time to pause and reflect and design change. However, it's essential that we make the time and space to do so. Whether you do this through writing in a journal, recording a voice memo with your phone while out on a walk, taking a break to meditate, exercise, or just getting coffee with someone to share experiences, the most important part is to create the time and space to empty your mind to reflect and filter where you want to place your focus. One of my favorite tools for doing this is utilizing the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt. He says to accomplish our goals, we must distill our dreams into daily action. It's a quarterly planner where you outline your annual goals, and the organized structure of the planner really helps you do exactly what Michael says, distill your dreams into daily actions. The planner has thoughtful questions. It helps you identify your 3 big daily tasks, how you want to defer and delegate the work you have. And I always notice a tremendous difference when I sit down and use the planner versus when I think I can just wing it all in my head. But I want to know what Jerry does, and I want to know what works for him, because it's a little bit different for all of us. I asked Jerry how he finds the time and space to reflect, recognize, and predict.
It's a combination of things. I think the time that I do my most reflecting and reading up on research is on my commute to and from work. So I just happen to be a train rider. So I commute on the train coming into work, which is about an hour long, which allows me to put on my headset and to listen to podcasts, join rooms on Clubhouse or other platforms on Twitter, and just really be in the space that I normally wouldn't be in when I get my day started, when I get to the office and at school sites, because things get so busy. So on my commute to work and on my commute home, that's when I find those times to really build my knowledge around the current trends and best practices.
We all have different mediums through how we reflect. The most important thing is to find a strategy that works best for you, that allows you to stay consistent and focused in distilling your dreams into daily actions. Jerry shared the first 2 parts of his framework for innovation, reflecting and recognizing. I'm curious though, how does Jerry predict what comes next?
The way that works best for me is calibrating the conversations that I have and then asking the same question multiple times. If I'm at a school site and I'm with a group of students, I will ask them the question, like, how do you wish the classroom to be as we come out of this environment and back to in-person instruction? Then I ask a group of teachers the same. And then I'll be with a group of administrators and ask them the same question. Then I'll be in spaces with parents and ask them the same questions. And then I'll be in executive cabinet meetings or leadership team meetings at the district office and ask the same question, and really seeing which points rise to the top. And then I begin to categorize the consistency in these comments that are being made. That demonstrates a pattern of thought to me. It's not necessarily the most scientific method, but it helps me calibrate and guide my decision making. So then once I do what I think is a good job of predicting, then I start to agendize those particular items and then to begin to have planning conversations about which directions are we going to go in. Are we going to do an online learning platform? If so, what does that look like? Or what's going to change in the classrooms? Here are some things that I would like to see. Let's talk about how those would work given your environment. So that's my understanding and my intent of how I predict. The other thing too is to get on these various platforms like Clubhouse and on Twitter chats and those chat rooms, and just be in spaces to kind of calibrate. What I'm hearing, is that reflective in the conversation that's taking place nationally or in some cases globally? And so if there's a little difference in that, then I'll say, ooh, that was a good point. Let me go back to my school site or to my district and ask this question. And I'll tweak the question a little bit and then begin to develop my thought process as a result of that new bit of information.
Jerry's vision for designing schools comes from deep reflection, ongoing dialogue, and iteration with his community. From veteran practitioners to the little learners, he creates the time and space for everyone to feel seen and heard. He embodies the very definition of building a culture of innovation through a culture of empathy. It's one of the reasons why I advocate for utilizing the design thinking process. I can remember countless executive briefings that I led in my role as education leadership executive at Apple, where we would have groups of district leaders attend to talk about the future of learning, where mostly they discussed designing for, not with, learners. When we design solutions without the voices of those involved, we miss a golden opportunity to uncover the gaps. Conducting learning forums and empathy interviews with everyone in your organization will lead you to soon realize, when you begin with empathy, what you think is challenged by what you learn. Engaging with learners in this way is powerful, inspiring, and above all, the ideas and thoughts that these young people express will move you from feeling overwhelmed to motivated about designing school. The number one reason we don't often open the door to these conversations is fear. Fear of responses, fear of having to respond to those responses, fear of trying something new, something that puts us outside of our comfort zone. Part of being a transformational leader is being a role model for the beliefs and values that you want others to adopt. Design thinking isn't just a series of steps. It's a mindset, a lifestyle that shapes you into becoming a transformational leader. You've heard Jerry share a few times now that he's stepped into spaces like Clubhouse, how he learns from others and creates a diverse network across different industries so that he's informed as he reflects, recognizes, and predicts future trends. I asked Jerry how he nurtures his mindset to step into new spaces and how he overcomes the fear of trying something new.
Well, I learned very quickly that if you're not in those spaces, then you're going to be left behind. But everything you mentioned, all of those emotions are very real. And it was real for me. And I remember when a good friend of mine invited me to be a part of Clubhouse, I downloaded the app and my first phase was curiosity. I'm too old to be here was the first thought in my mind. So as I started to explore and as I started to listen and get a better understanding of that platform, I took the next step with a little bit of encouragement, and that was to begin to participate, begin to raise your hand and begin to ask questions. And if called upon, begin to accept those invitations and go to the stage and participate in the conversation. And at first I was very nervous because you're right. Here's the superintendent of a large urban district. It's a public platform. And what are people going to think if I say the wrong thing or if I make the wrong comments? Over time, you just have to trust yourself. You have to take that first leap of faith, get into that space and realize it's a vulnerable space to be. As educational leaders, we need to model that vulnerability if we're going to move forward. As educational leaders, we need to model that vulnerability if we're going to move forward. The people that are in this space are very like-minded people and make people like me feel really comfortable. My first series of navigating that space. And then the more I did it, the more comfortable I got. And now I don't have a problem raising my hand, contributing to a conversation and or even holding a discussion myself with my colleagues. It is that thing that we always talk about, take risks, make mistakes, learn from your mistakes, and then grow. That's the mindset that I've embraced. And the same thing with the Twitter chat rooms as well. And for some reason, there's a sense of the Twitter chat rooms are larger rooms because Twitter is a much larger platform. And there are people with accents on there and from other countries. And how can I contribute? We have professors, you have authors on there, and here's a little old superintendent getting up trying to contribute. But we're all important, regardless of our titles. Our experiences are different. And so until you occupy those spaces, you really won't understand that we're pretty much all the same, learning and trying to navigate this unprecedented time together.
The fear of being irrelevant. It's a powerful motivator that very quickly forces you to experiment beyond your comfort zone and helps you develop a deep sense of self-awareness around your skills, your values, and what your unique contribution to the world is. One of my favorite definitions of this comes from Seth Godin in his book Linchpin, where he says, your unique contribution is your art. He says your art is what you do when no one can tell you exactly how to do it. Your art is the act of taking personal responsibility, challenging the status quo, and changing people. As a graduate during the Great Recession, I often share how I learned very quickly, after having received a layoff notice in my first year, just how irrelevant I was and how little school had prepared me to thrive in today's world of work. It wasn't until a few years ago when I read Thomas Friedman's Thank You for Being Late, where chapter 2, titled What the Hell Happened in 2007, brought incredible clarity to many years of frustration and confusion for me. Friedman shares how 2007 was an inflection point. While yes, it was the year of the Great Recession and economic hardship for many, it was also the year the iPhone came out, the year that companies like Facebook, Twitter, Airbnb were launched, that really defined so many different aspects of our lives. It's a powerful reminder of the role and responsibility to design schools as places where students have access and exposure to the opportunities that their world offers, along with the self-awareness around their strengths and their skills, so that they can discover their art and their unique place in the world. As William Gibson reminds us, the future is here, it just isn't evenly distributed. I love how Jerry has a framework for just about everything. He builds relationships with people outside his industry and steps into spaces unknown as a lifelong learner himself. How does he do this? Begin with curiosity, he says. Build on the encouragement of those around you and then participate, ask questions, share your story or an idea or a strategy that can add to the conversation. The key to making the transition from participating to leading, Jerry says, is vulnerability. As Brené Brown shares, vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, which is ultimately courage. Vulnerability, she shares, is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, empathy, and creativity. In being the role model for this, Jerry is building a community that embodies a mindset toward creating a culture of innovation.
To answer your question of creativity and building trust among a leadership team is to take the leap of faith, to pull people together into a Zoom meeting and say, hey, it's going to be messy. This is the first time some of us are doing it, but we're going to give it our best shot and we're going to do the best we can with what we have. And there were a lot of mistakes up front. We owned them. There were calls that were dropped. Half of the people couldn't get on. The Wi-Fi connection was bad. We didn't have the subscription that allowed for X amount of people to be on, so people couldn't get on. And we went through all of these issues, but we didn't give up. And it was myself and my executive cabinet that kept coming back, that kept apologizing, that kept saying, hey, we're sorry. This is, new for us too. And we're trying to navigate this as well. So the first thing is to don't ask your team to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself. And that's I think the vulnerability part of it is yeah, I made mistakes. Yeah, I was embarrassed. Yes, it happens to me. It even happened at board meetings.
Join me next time for part 2 of my 3-part interview with Jerry Almendarez and 2 principals who joined me within the district to talk about how he builds a culture of trust, encourages creativity and risk-taking, and the ripple effect that has throughout the organization. It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community.